Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. I'm your host, Tom Schwab, and today we're diving into a game changer for so many of our listeners. It's how introverts can harness the power of podcasting to grow their authority, influence, and business. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Podcasting for introverts? Isn't that just for extroverts, those people that love to talk all the time? Well, my guest today is David Hall, and he's here to shatter that myth. David is the host of the Quiet and Strong podcast and is an expert in helping introverts embrace their strengths, find their voice, and thrive in a space where they may not have traditionally felt comfortable. If you've ever hesitated to get behind the mic, worried about networking, or thought about being an introvert might hold you back in business, well, this episode is for you. We'll be talking about why introverts actually make some of the best podcast guests and how they can prepare effectively and how podcasting can be your powerful networking tool. So grab your notebook, settle in, and let's get started. David, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, Tom. It's good to be with you. And we had such a great conversation on my podcast, and I'm looking forward to this one.
I love that conversation because I think there's this big misunderstanding on what an introvert is. And you talk about it on the Quiet and Strong podcast. And I guess let's start there. How do you define being an introvert?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still so misunderstood. I guess that's why I have the podcast and do the work that I do. About half the population are introverts. And it's not good or bad. We just have different strengths and different needs. For the longest time, and I think you went through this too, for the longest time, I felt like something was wrong with me. And many of my guests on my show have said something similar. And for me, it was kind of a long journey to figure that out. I got a degree in psychology and a master's in counseling. And, I was studying personality, but it was really when I got certified to do the Myers-Briggs, and I remember distinctly the facilitator saying, introverts think and then speak. Extroverts speak in order to think. And that was one of those light bulb moments. I'm like, oh yeah, I do think before I speak. And it's not a self-censoring thing. It's more of just a natural, we process inward. We don't say everything. We think about it and we share what we think is most important. And that's a gift. And extroverts have gifts, introverts have gifts, and just understanding that we're deep thinkers, we probably need to prepare differently for things like being on a podcast or a public speech. But it's just a matter of understanding that, and that a lot of gifts come from being a deep thinker.
The scarlet eye, if you want to call it that, right? That there's something broken with you if you're an introvert. And when you were talking about that, it reminded me of my dad telling stories that the nuns used to hit him on the hand when he would write with his left hand. You can't write with your left hand, right? There was something broken with it. And now we would look at that and say, no, right? He was left-handed. And it's not that one is right or one is wrong, just different ways of doing things. And we've talked about this a little bit. We have seen that the majority of our clients who are podcast guests are introverts. And sometimes I think they are great guests just because of what you said. They listen, they think, and then they speak, right? And there's probably the opposite of that is sometimes when you get somebody that's at the opposite extreme of that, it's where they don't even let the person finish the question and they're already answering it. And, that can be almost insulting on there. So I think introverts, while they may not be great at small talk and in big groups, they excel at one-on-one conversations. And that's really what a podcast interview is.
The left-handed example is such a good one. It's not something that we choose to be left or right-handed. My wife is left-handed, and she had a cousin that was left-handed, and her teachers did make her write with her right hand, and it really did some damage because that wasn't her dominant hand.
Well, and it's even the idea of that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
People would say, are you introverted or extroverted? Right. And I would always say, I'm a functional introvert. Like, as there was something wrong with being introverted. And, I'm an engineer by degree. And so I was probably on the scale there a little bit more outgoing than the other engineers. So I would say, yeah, I'm a little bit more extroverted, but then I get in a large crowd and no, I'm not extroverted. And I think one of the best things that helped me on am I an introvert or an extrovert is where do you get energy from and where does the energy drain you? So I live on 6.5 acres. We don't have blinds on our house because you can't see any neighbors. And I love it. This is where I get my energy. I'll go to conferences, but know that I'm not going to be the last person there because, come about, 7 or 8 o'clock, my tank is dry. I need to go back to my room and recharge.
Yeah. And yeah, that sounds nice, Tom. I don't call anything extroverted, because I'm an introvert. I need people. I love people. I'm getting to know you, and I know that's true for you. You need people. You love people. You value those in your life. I know that. But it's just like we might need different doses, you mentioned small talk. We don't love small talk. Sometimes we can get better at it. If you're not good at small talk, you can get better. But the purpose of it for us is to get to those deeper conversations. But again, we want to get to those deeper conversations with people. And it's just, that's a common thing. And our energy is very important too. We do need to recharge. But the other thing is, there's more to it than that. We also need some time to do lots of things. We want to have great conversations, and being with the right people in the right room, you might be energized by those conversations, but we also need time to think, to plan, to dream. And we do some really good work alone, even though we also do good work collaborating as well.
So let's talk about how this applies to podcasts, especially with your journey there, because so many people say, well, I would like to be an authority. I'd like to be a thought leader here, but this is holding me back. And I was amazed when I looked at, I think I asked ChatGPT, give me 10, famous people that are extrovert or introverted. And it was, people, I can't think of them all right now, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all of these great leaders. And it's like, they were up on stage. They were leaders and they were introverts. So it's not one or the other. How did you go through that? And have you struggled with that at all?
Oh, of course. And just presenting, giving speeches, I used to struggle with it. But what I figured out was that I think before I speak. And so often it's good for me to do some preparation. Another part of it is the whole perfectionist thing. So, telling myself, hey, you're going to do your best preparation and you're going to give your best presentation or best speech or best podcast. But just keep in mind that you're not perfect, but nobody is. Nobody that's listening to you is perfect either. And another thing about introversion, we have a superpower of reflection. So after you do your presentation, you can think about that. And I always start with, if I'm talking to myself, I say, what went well? What did I like about that? And what will I do differently next time? So, and that was kind of what really helped me overcome that. And the other thing is, Tom, this, we're being asked to present something or being asked to be on a podcast for a reason. So that should give you confidence that you have some expertise and you've thought well through it as an introvert, and that's why you're there. So that should give you confidence to be able to do the podcast or do the speech.
We're going back to that idea of small talk, right? Well, if we know why we're here, we know what we're talking about, before you even say yes, it's something that you're interested in, engaged on, you have an opinion on it, right? If I ask you on, the macro economic influences in sub-Saharan Africa, you don't have an opinion on it. You don't have the expertise. And sometimes I feel the same way. I was recently at a wedding, and family member of the other family came up, and very, very nice person, but all they wanted to talk about was sports. And I'm like, I'm good for about 5 minutes on this conversation. And then I have given up everything on, someone else, if they wanted to talk business, I can talk about that all the time. So it's sort of finding your lane that you're comfortable in too.
Yeah, yeah. And I love watching sports, but I am no expert and I'm not going to have any type of good conversation about it. So I relate to that.
Yes. So, what has stepping out done for you, right? Being the podcast host, being more of a profile. I dare say influencer, because that has such a negative connotation now, but you are influencing people. You are a thought leader. So what has that done for you?
Yeah. So let me just say why I started. So, I started blogging about 10 years ago, about introversion. I wrote my first book when I realized I was a busy guy and an introvert, and the things I was reading weren't really calling out what an introvert needs for time management. So that was my first book. And then the pandemic hit, and I was hearing all kinds of things about introverts. Like, introverts are just loving this, being alone all the time. But yet, and there was other myths too, but with that one, it was like, I know a lot of lonely introverts right now, and introverts that are not in good situations. And I just really wanted to give a voice to what it means to be an introvert, and also, just continue to spread this message. And so January 2021, on World Introvert Day, that's January 2nd every year, I decided to launch the podcast. And it really has helped establish authority as an introvert, as an introvert thought leader. It's helped me find people that need this message, whether that's buying the book or listening to the podcast or other things. So it's been very powerful.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of exposure brings opportunity, and the idea that you're not alone, right? Because I've seen studies that say the majority of people, well, at least in the United States, are introverted. So you think about it, the majority feels like they're a minority, or that the world is not built for them. That's sad.
Yeah. The other thing, Tom, it's really allowed me to build a great network. I'm talking to great people like yourself, and it's really a great networking tool as well.
Talk more about that, because it's networking at your strengths, right? Because so many times people, there's the fear of speaking is only greater than the fear of death. And right up there too is probably the fear of having to network all the time. So you've sort of found a creative way to do that plays to your strengths.
Absolutely. And, we think of that networking event, which we fear because we're not really made to bounce from person to person and try to think of interesting things to say on the spot. But in this way, I'm having one-on-one conversations. There's some before and after interactions. And it's just really getting to know people. And in my network that I have now, people are recommending people to be on my show. And it's amazing. It's a way to really get to know people. And I mean, we're doing what we excel at, this one-on-one conversation. Again, it's not that we don't like people. We just don't want to do the traditional networking event, which is not effective for us. But we really can thrive in the one-on-one, and that's what this is. It's like you and I are having a great one-on-one conversation, and other people get to hear it as well.
Exactly. And your book, Mind Your Time, Time Management, Productivity, and Success, especially for Introverts. Thank you for sending it. I've got the signed copy by the author.
Yeah.
And when I read that, it was like, why didn't I know this before? And my wife and I are both introverts, and we have found that when we embrace that and work to our strengths, it works so much better, right? Huge parties or having 24 people over to the house, we've done it, but oh man, that's draining, right? And we found a few summers ago, it's like, let's invite couples over or family members, over one at a time. And it worked out so much better. Like at Christmas, you see everybody, you don't get to talk to anyone, but to actually sit down and have a meal with them, it is so much more memorable and meaningful. And it's like, well, why didn't we design our lives and our experiences the way that worked for us?
Yeah. So even if you have this big holiday party, it kind of feels like that networking event where you just get to get a little bit of everybody, where you really do want to go deep, even with your family and friends, you want to have those deep conversations. And again, it's not that you don't want to have conversations. It's just you want to have deep ones.
It's sort of like playing to your strengths, right? I'm 5'9". My basketball career ended about 8th grade when I stopped growing.
Yeah.
Right. It would have just been frustrating, to play in the NBA when I can't jump, but it's sort of that same thing. It's like, okay, so if this is who I am, this is how God made me, right? I don't want to change. I want to be more of who I am. How can I leverage that more? And I think in marketing, that's true also, and in business, right? That we have to pick our lanes in what works best for us, where we can excel. And these deep conversations, I think are important, because today I heard somebody refer to it as the problem is not attention, it's trust, right? There's a lot of people we know about, but we'll never work with because we don't trust them. And so we can use digital media to get known, but that doesn't always relate to trust.
Well, I mean, as a podcast host or guest, people are hearing your stories and they're getting to know you, and that's how they can build trust before they ever even meet you.
Can you go back to when you first started the podcast? What was going through your mind? What was the imposter syndrome or the self-doubt that you had to go through? Because, knowing a lot of podcasters, it's not 0 to Joe Rogan overnight. So what did that look like?
Yeah, you always have those thoughts. Like, who am I to do this? I did. It was good to give myself a deadline. Like, okay, World Introvert Day, that's the day. But you have to work through that. And, part of all that is, I'm not ready yet. But for me, I was like, you know what? Whether you're ready or not, if, people need to hear this message. There's so many people that do not understand themselves. And there's a lot of people that it actually causes pain. I've met some very successful people that are introverts that still haven't embraced it and still just feel struggle with that, giving a speech or doing networking and not really understanding, hey, there's a better way for you to approach this using your gifts and strengths. And so, that really was the driving factor, is like, there's still so many people that don't understand themselves. And that's kind of crazy to me. It's 2025 and we still don't get our personalities and the personalities of those that we're working with, or, our family members.
I always tell people when they come with that concern, that's a good thing, right? I remember some artist saying the day you walk on stage without stage fright is the day you don't deserve to be there anymore, right? So you made the decision to start, right? January 2nd. Now, the data says that 80% of podcasts die within the first 10 episodes, right? In the industry, it's called pod fade. And, if you want to embarrass somebody, for the quarter they're talking about their new podcast, wait 90 days and ask them about their podcast again, because chances are it doesn't exist anymore. So what kept you going through that, especially that first 6 months or that first year? Because it's a commitment to do the podcast. Yeah.
And Tom, I have seen so much of that. Like, maybe I've even been on someone's podcast and, they're expert in introversion. And then all of a sudden it's like, where are they? Where'd they go? And, there's not many that are long running. And again, I'm just driven by something. I felt like something was wrong with me. And it was probably when I really embraced all of this, it was probably in my late 30s. And I just know that people can live better lives, have more confidence, get their message across, whatever that is. And I continue to see myths and misconceptions, and that drives me. And it's what I do. And I'm working on my next book. I'm giving speeches and things like that. And so yeah, I don't have an end in sight.
And it's funny how we work on the paradigms maybe that we learned as a kid, right? And what was true 40, 50 years ago isn't true anymore. And even in marketing today, it's like the loudest person gets heard. No, the loudest person gets ignored, right? And this idea, I still think that too many people in business think that it's the carnival barker that is out there making all the noise, that is getting all the attention and all the sales. And it's like, they might be making a lot of noise, but it may not be converting. I'm in a group, entrepreneurs organization, and you would think, okay, entrepreneurs, it's probably mostly extroverts. I would say it's a larger percentage than the normal population of introverts, right? And it's not what you would expect. They talk about the millionaire next door? It's not the guy you think that's driving the Ferrari with the mansion. No, it's the person doing the laundromat. And I think there's a misunderstanding too of who the leaders are, who the authorities are, who the business leaders are, and they're largely introverts.
Yeah, and it's not the loudest. And that's still just a lot of people still think that, but it is the person with the best ideas. And a lot of my work is I'm really driven to help those that have these great ideas, because people say, oh, introverts, they have nothing to say. We're thinking all the time, so we have a lot to say. But some people don't have that confidence because they don't understand themselves. So a big part of my mission is helping those with the great ideas really share them, whether it's on a podcast, speaking up in a staff meeting, giving a presentation or a pitch to a customer. We have great ideas, and we just have to, and you can start to get known for, hey, David may not be speaking all the time, but listen when he speaks, and you can get known like that people are like, okay, what do you think about this, Tom? That reputation can be very powerful.
Yeah. So what would you tell somebody like that says, well, I got ideas, but, I don't want to share them, or I don't know if this is the time yet.
It's really what we've been talking about. So again, do your work, build your expertise, but then prepare for that. Even if it's just a meeting, a staff meeting, think ahead of time. Like, okay, what do I need to prepare for this meeting? Look ahead at your calendar. Are there certain questions I want to ask or points I want to make? Or that could apply to a presentation or a speech or podcast. Prepare ahead of time. And just the other things, it's like, just know that your ideas are valuable and people need to hear them. And just keep going. Sometimes you have to keep working to get your ideas heard. It might not happen the first time.
I think of the magician, Penn Jillette, Penn and Teller. I remember him saying one time, he says, how bad do you have to hate someone not to tell something that could help them? And I never thought about that. And he's like, so many times well, it's awkward. I don't know how it's going to land, all the rest of this. And so I'm not going to tell them. And he used an analogy, right? If somebody was going to get hit by a bus, would you tell them? How bad do you have to tell somebody? How bad do you have to hate someone not to tell them? You wouldn't say, well, I didn't tell them about the bus because it was awkward. I don't like public speaking, all the rest of that. And when you put it out that way, it was sort of that an ego or vanity thing for me. And the other thing, I thought of myself and thought, well, I can always say I live in Southwest Michigan, right? There's not that many people I can tell, right? If I lived in New York City or Chicago or someplace famous, then I would have much more of an impact. But, today with the tools we have, there's no reason not to. And I sort of think of myself at the pearly gates and, the final judgment there and saying, so many people blessed you and helped you and shared you with this, what did you do to bless other people, right? To share what you could do. And I don't think the answer of, well, God, I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. What could I do? It's like, no, with the internet and everything, you can do a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're being heard all over the world, you know? You're probably being heard in just about every country there is, you know? So it's pretty amazing.
And it's interesting too that a lot of times we'll say, well, I don't like public speaking or I don't like to be seen. I don't like video, right? I don't like the way I look. I think we're all sort of gotten used to Zoom calls now. And I encourage people to watch their own recordings, right? So they can get better, like you said, to reflect on that. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of us like the way we sound. That's why we were made so we don't have to listen to ourselves.
Yeah. You have a great voice though, Tom.
Well, thank you. It's not the one when I hear the recording, it's like, that's not what I sound like. And it took a long time to really get used to that. And when people say you've got a voice for radio or a voice for radio, I'm like, okay, thank you. I think you meant I got a face for radio.
Yeah. But even with all that, yeah, like in our world today, we are looking at ourselves in the mirror many times. You know, we may have many meetings per day and we're getting used to that. So, you know, you can, you know, it's just so funny. Sometimes you watch someone and it's almost like they're in the witness protection program. You know, the lights are so dark, or, you know, you're just peeking over the fence, you know, so you can get better at how you look on camera. You also can get, you know, you can't really change your voice, but you can get better at how you sound and just, I mean, you know, so I've been podcasting for 4 years now, and I would like to think I'm better than when I started 4 years ago, because you just get better, but you're not going to get better if you don't start.
I remember years ago listening to, I think it was like 2019, Pat Flynn, who got the Podcaster of the Year award. And I gave him so much credit. He brought out one of his recordings from his first interview. And David, it was cringeworthy, right? And he said he recorded it, and it was 3 months before he put it out there. But he had the guts to go back and let people listen to it, because we all start somewhere and you get better from there.
Yeah. You know what? And shout out to Pat Flynn. I give him credit too. He was somebody I listened to and I heard him say that. He was someone I listened to when I was getting ready to launch.
And, you know, what he has, blessed to be a blessing, right? He figured it out, so he helped other people with this. So, you know, I'm always big on, you know, what people I want them to think, what I want them to believe, and what I want them to do, right? The big thing is you don't need to be an extrovert to be an authority. I want you to believe that you can do it too. But if you just have education without action, it becomes entertaining, right? And there are more entertaining people than David and I right now. So let's talk about actions, right? There's a reason we're not on movies. We're here on a podcast. What actions would you tell people to take, right? So that they can get something out of this conversation.
And if you are an introvert, the biggest thing is self-awareness. Get to know your strengths and needs. And if you need time alone after you were a podcast guest, great. Your extroverted friend may not need that. You know, don't compare yourself to someone that has different needs than you. Your needs are still very valuable. So get to know yourself, you know. Listen to the Quiet and Strong podcast. We have great guests like Tom and others, and we talk about the strengths and needs of introverts and strategies for success. And that's the whole thing. It's like introverts can be wildly successful. We have great minds, great imaginations, but we just have to plot our path to success that may look quite different from our extroverted friend or family member or colleague. Our path to success is going to be using our strengths, honoring our needs.
Well, I can't say it enough. Check out the Quiet and Strong podcast. That's really helped me embrace who I am and the unique gifts I have. Also, the book, you know, Mind Your Time. When's the new book coming out, David?
I'm hoping this spring. It's going to be about a lot of what we've talked about today, Tom. It's going to be about confidence and you know, having a voice. You know, whether that be on a podcast or giving a speech or presentation, speaking up in meetings, and just really understanding introversion and where you excel.
Oh, that's awesome. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others. So thank you so much for who you are, all you do, and helping us be all we can be.
Thanks, Tom.
Wow. That was a powerful conversation with David. If there was one thing I'd like you to take away from today's episode, it's this. Being an introvert is not a weakness. It's your superpower. And when you learn to embrace that, you can communicate more effectively, show up with more confidence, and truly connect with your audience in a meaningful way. Podcast interviews are more one-on-one conversations than they are interviews, and they're sure not a big stage with a keynote. You see, they allow you to think before you speak, to bring depth to the discussion, and create real trust with your ideal audience who's listening. If you've been holding back from leveraging podcasts because you thought you weren't the right type of person, I hope today's conversation changed that mindset. Now here's the next step. Start small. Find a topic that you're passionate about. Practice speaking about it and begin reaching out to some shows where your message aligns. And if you're ready to take the leap but need the help, check out Quiet and Strong Podcasts from David Hall to get more insights. Remember, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. Don't keep your expertise to yourself. Share it, serve your audience, and grow your brand and grow your business. Until next time, keep making a difference and know that you're one conversation away.